Lee,
Are we in trouble?
we're fine. Eyes on me.
Stella felt it before she understood it. A small wrongness, like a note played just off key in a song she knew by heart. She stood at the altar in a dress she had chosen because it did not feel like a costume, and she held the hands of a man who had once told her he never wanted a wedding, only a marriage, and here he was anyway, giving her both. The officiant's voice moved through the vows like water. Somewhere behind them the ocean kept doing what it always did, rising and falling, like it had nowhere else to be. Then she saw him, a man in gray coveralls, moving fast down the hallway past the kitchen, the one marked private, the one nobody working today should have any reason to enter. She did not gasp, she did not turn her head. She had spent years training herself not to react to small things in front of other people, because small things had cost her everything once, and she had learned that panic never fixed anything, it only announced you. She leaned in close enough that only Lee would hear her. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. Lee did not stop looking at her. His thumb moved once over her knuckles, the same small motion he always made when he wanted her to know he was listening even when his face gave nothing away. "We're fine," he said. "Eyes on me." It should have been enough. For most of her life it would have been enough. A man telling her not to worry, and her believing him, because believing him was easier than being afraid alone. But Stella had learned the hard way that the people who told you not to worry were sometimes the ones with the most reason to be worried themselves. Above them, tucked into the crown molding where nobody thought to look, a small camera kept recording, the way it had all morning, the way it would for the rest of the day, patient and indifferent to the fact that it was about to become the only witness that mattered. An hour earlier, Lee had stood alone in the guest house bathroom reading a message on his phone that had arrived from a number he did not recognize. 3 words: cancel the wedding. He had read it twice, then deleted it, then told himself it was nothing. Some jealous rival, some disgruntled employee, the ordinary cost of being a man other men wanted to see fail. He had not told Stella. He had told himself this was protection. In truth, it was the same instinct that had built his company and cost him every friendship that required honesty over control. He would rather carry the weight alone than let anyone see him afraid, including the woman he was about to promise his whole life to. He had not told Damon either, not directly, but Damon had a way of knowing things before he was told them. By the time the first guests arrived, Damon had already doubled the security detail and repositioned 2 men near the service entrance, all without a word to the couple. In his mind, this was simple math. Fear helped nobody on a wedding day. Better to carry the risk quietly and let them have their one perfect afternoon. 3 good people, each convinced that silence was a kindness. None of them noticing they were building the exact conditions for disaster. The vows continued. Lee spoke his the way he did everything, carefully, like a man who had rehearsed but wanted it to still sound true. "I built a company by trying to see every risk coming," he said. "I never saw you coming. I'm still not sure how I got this lucky." Stella laughed despite herself, the sound catching in her throat because she was also, quietly, still watching the hallway. When it was her turn, she took his hands and did not let herself look away from him, because looking away had always been how she hid. "You make me feel like maybe I'm not one mistake away from losing everything," she said. "I've spent a long time believing that. I don't anymore. Not with you." She meant it entirely. She also, in that same breath, thought of the woman she had noticed watching the rehearsal the evening before, standing near the tree line with a stillness that did not belong to a guest or a photographer, and she decided again, the way she had decided a dozen times since, that today was not the day to mention it. Lee had enough on him. She would tell him tomorrow. There would be time tomorrow. There is always supposed to be time tomorrow. The ceremony ended the way weddings end, in applause and relief and the particular joy of people who love you, crying without embarrassment. Champagne, music drifting over the cliffside lawn, Neris moving through the crowd, with the tight, practiced calm of a woman who had learned long ago that perfection was the only thing she could still control. Roscoe, uninvited to write about anyone but there as an old friend of the family, watching the whole scene with the instinct of a man who had spent his career noticing what other people missed and hating himself a little for still doing it even here. Stella found Lee near the water as the sun started to lower, his jacket off, his tie loosened, looking, for once, like a man instead of a name on a building. "Are we in trouble?" she asked again, softer this time, almost teasing, testing whether the answer had changed now that the ceremony was behind them. He pulled her in, his forehead against hers. "Only the good kind," he said. "The kind where I have to spend the rest of my life making sure I deserve you." She wanted so badly for that to be the whole truth. For one evening, she let herself believe it was. Neither of them saw Damon slip away just after sunset, phone in hand, walking fast toward the security trailer parked behind the estate's old carriage house. He had promised himself he would only do a routine pass through the day's footage before locking up, nothing more, a formality before he let himself finally relax. He almost missed it. 3 seconds, no more, tucked between two ordinary moments near the gift table. A guest in a pale blue dress reaching out to admire another woman's ring, the kind of small polite gesture that happens at every wedding in the world. Except the hands lingered a half-second too long. Except when Damon rewound it and slowed it down, he saw two identical wedding rings pass between two people who should never have had a reason to trade them at all. He sat back in his chair, the glow of the monitor the only light in the room, and felt something cold settle low in his stomach, the particular fear of a man who has just realized the danger he prepared for was never the one that actually came. Damon did not sleep. He watched the 3 seconds 14 times, until the pale blue dress and the quiet exchange of rings stopped looking like an accident and started looking like something aimed directly at the man he had spent 9 years protecting. By 6 in the morning, he had made a decision that would define everything after it. He would not call the police. He would not wake the house. He would go straight to Lee, and only Lee, because the one thing worse than a threat was a threat handled by someone who panicked. Lee opened the door in yesterday's undershirt, hair flat on one side, still half inside a dream where nothing was wrong yet. "We need to talk," Damon said, alone. Something in his voice made Lee's stomach drop before he understood why. He glanced back at Stella, still asleep, one arm thrown over the pillow where he had been lying a moment ago, and he stepped out into the hallway and closed the door softly behind him, the way you close a door on a room you are trying to protect. The footage played on Damon's laptop in the cold light of the security trailer. Lee watched it twice in silence. The second time, he leaned in close enough that the glow lit up the tired lines around his eyes. "That's not possible," he said. "That's my ring." "It was," Damon said. For about 3 seconds it wasn't. Lee sat back. For a man who had built an empire out of seeing problems before they arrived, he suddenly looked like someone standing in a room with no doors. "Who is she?" "I don't know yet," Damon said, "but I will." Lee's first instinct, the one that had made him rich and occasionally made him lonely, was to solve it quietly, contain it, find her, buy her silence if that's what it took, protect the one day of his life he refused to let anyone touch. He almost said as much. Then he thought of Stella's voice at the altar, "Are we in trouble?" and the way he had told her they were fine, without actually knowing if that was true. "Don't tell her yet," he said. "Not until we know what we're telling her." Damon didn't answer right away, and that silence carried its own weight. He believed in secrecy the way other men believed in scripture, but even he heard how that sentence sounded now, one day into a marriage already choosing what to hide. Downstairs, unable to sleep either, Stella stood at the kitchen window, watching gulls fight over something on the lawn, and she made a decision of her own. The woman from the rehearsal. The stillness that didn't belong to her. She had promised herself she would say something today, and today had already started, and she was done being someone who waited for a better moment that never came. When Lee finally came down, gray around the eyes. She almost lost her nerve. Almost. "There's something I should have told you 2 days ago," she said. He went very still. "Okay." A woman was watching the rehearsal, standing back by the trees. I didn't recognize her. I didn't want to say anything and ruin the night, and then I didn't want to say anything and ruin the morning. And now I'm just saying it because keeping it in my chest feels worse than whatever you're about to say back. Lee felt something crack open in his chest, not from anger, but from recognition. He had done the exact same thing, in the exact same hours, for what he'd told himself were the exact same reasons. "I need to show you something," he said. He told her everything. The footage, the rings, Damon's silence, and his own instinct to match it. Stella listened with her arms wrapped around herself, and when he finished, she didn't cry, which somehow frightened him more than if she had. "Say something," he said. "We did the same thing," she said quietly. "Both of us. We both decided the other person couldn't handle the truth. On our wedding day. It wasn't an accusation. It landed like one anyway." By mid-morning, Mina had the ring in a small evidence bag on Damon's desk, turning it under a jeweler's loupe borrowed from a contact who specialized in authentication fraud. The metal was correct. The weight was correct. Any jeweler in the world would have called it a perfect match. "It's not," Mina said finally. "There's engraving inside the band. Microscopic. You'd need equipment to even see it." Lee took the loupe with hands that were not quite steady. Under the light, tiny letters swam into focus, initials that were unmistakably his own, in handwriting that was unmistakably not. "That's not my writing," he said. "No," Mina agreed. "But it's familiar. Give me a day." Roscoe called that afternoon, his voice careful in the way it got when he was sitting on something he wasn't ready to say out loud yet. He had spent the morning running the pale blue dress through every old contact he still had from his investigative years, the ones he'd promised himself he was done using. "I found her employment history," he said. 8 years ago. Compliance department. Same construction firm that built the site your accident happened on. Stella. Same one that got quietly folded into a much bigger parent company right after everything got buried. Stella's hand found the counter before her legs remembered how to hold her up. "That's not a coincidence," she said. "I don't think anything about this is a coincidence," Roscoe said. "I'm not publishing until I understand what I'm looking at. I did that once before. Published too early, got it wrong, and it cost someone their whole life. I'm not doing that again." That evening, Mina came back with the loupe and a printout and a face that had lost its earlier calm. "I matched the handwriting," she said. "It's yours, Stella." "Not exactly. It's copied from something you wrote. Small, private. Something almost nobody would ever have seen." Stella went cold all the way through. There was only one thing it could be. A letter she had written years ago, before Lee, before any of this, sealed inside a box she had never shown to a living soul except the one person she had trusted enough to read it once, quietly, and never speak of again. Someone had seen it. Someone had copied it, letter by letter, and hidden it inside a ring exchanged in front of 300 witnesses at her own wedding, as if daring her to notice, or daring her not to. Lee watched her face change, and understood, without being told, that whatever this was, it had reached further into her past than either of them had ever let it reach into their future. "Whoever did this didn't just want to threaten us," he said slowly. "They wanted you to know they've been watching you for a long time before I ever met you." Stella sat down at the kitchen table because standing suddenly felt like too much to ask of her legs. "Watching you for a long time." The words moved through her like cold water, finding every crack. "Before I met you," she said, "there's something you don't know. Something I never told anyone, not even Neris." Lee pulled out the chair across from her and waited, the way he did in board meetings when he already sensed the number was going to be bad and wanted to hear the whole thing before he reacted. "After the collapse," she said, "after I lost the license, lost the firm, lost basically everything I thought I was, the company offered me money, a settlement, quiet, no lawsuit, No headlines, just enough to disappear and rebuild somewhere nobody knew my name. You took it, Lee said. Not a question. I took it. She made herself keep looking at him. I told myself it was because fighting them would take years I didn't have. But the real reason was smaller and uglier than that. If I sued, it would have gone after the whole company, and that company employed 400 people who had nothing to do with what happened. Cutting a check to me was easy for them. Losing their jobs because of me would not have been easy for those families. So you protected strangers, Lee said quietly, and let it eat you alive instead. Something like that. He sat with that for a moment, and then he did something that cost him more than she understood. He reached across the table and put both hands flat on top of hers, and he told her the thing he had been carrying since the ring first surfaced on Damon's monitor. My firm has an investment in a holding company, he said. Diversified, boring, the kind of thing you buy because the numbers work and you don't ask enough questions about what's underneath it. 3 years ago, that holding company absorbed a smaller construction firm that was struggling, bought it out of trouble. I signed off on it because Mina's predecessor said it was clean. Stella went very still. It's them, isn't it? She said. It's them, Lee said. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. But I made money, Stella. My firm made money helping the same company that buried what happened to you stay alive. The kitchen went quiet in a way that had nothing peaceful in it. Before either of them could say the next thing, the doorbell rang, sharp and ordinary in a house that no longer felt like it contained anything ordinary. Mina stood on the porch, with a folder under her arm, and the particular tightness in her jaw she got when she had already decided something difficult and just needed them to catch up. You two need to stop trying to protect each other's reputations, she said, before either had a chance to explain. I've read enough settlement language in my career to know exactly what silence costs people. If we keep managing this instead of following it, we are going to lose control of it completely. If we're watching this together right now, tell me in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from, because what Mina found next was about to turn quiet suspicion into something neither of them could take back. At that exact moment, Mina opened the folder and laid 3 pages on the table. The settlement I found isn't just yours, Stella, she said. There were others. Employees who saw something the week of the collapse and were paid to never talk about it. One of them was a compliance officer who refused to sign. She disappeared from every record after that. No forwarding address, no new employer, nothing. Roscoe arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath in the way of a man who had been running down a hallway instead of walking it. Her name is Grace Yoon, he said. Former compliance officer, same firm, same year as the accident. And she was here yesterday. Pale blue dress. I have a photo from the caterer's staff badge that matches her exactly to the woman in your ring footage. Why would she come to our wedding? Lee said. Because she's been trying to get someone to listen for 8 years, Roscoe said, and nobody with a security camera and enough money to actually be believed ever gave her the chance, until now. Stella felt something shift inside her chest, something between grief and recognition. She thought of every quiet year she had spent believing she was the only one who had paid a price for staying silent, and she realized she had never once wondered who else had been asked to swallow the same deal. We need to find her, Stella said, now, before anyone else does. They found her 40 minutes later, in a rented room 2 towns over, unconscious on the floor beside an overturned chair, a thin trail of blood at her temple from where she'd fallen, or been made to fall. Paramedics worked over her, while Damon held the door, and Lee stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the one lead who could have explained everything, now unable to speak at all. It was Stella who saw it first, tucked half under the bed where it had rolled, small and easy to miss. A little black storage device, no bigger than a matchbook, with a strip of tape across it, and 4 words written in careful handwriting. For Stella. Only Stella. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Whatever Grace Yoon had been trying to protect for 8 years, she had finally decided, lying alone in a rented room with people closing in on her, that Stella was the only person left she trusted to carry it. Stella plugged it into Mina's laptop that night, with Lee standing behind her, Both of them braced for something they could not yet name. The first file opened on its own. Old footage, time-stamped years before the wedding, years before Lee had ever heard her name. It showed the construction site the morning of the collapse, and standing near the site office, in a jacket Lee recognized instantly because he had bought it for the man himself as a birthday gift, was someone he had trusted for a decade. Lee did not move for a long moment. He knew that jacket. He knew the way the man wore it, hands in the pockets, shoulders squared like he was always half a second from stepping between danger and the people he loved. "Damon," he said. "It's Damon." Stella paused the footage with a shaking finger, freezing the frame on a face neither of them wanted to recognize. "It's not proof of anything," she said quietly. "The way people say things they don't quite believe. Only that he was there." "He never told me he was there," Lee said. 9 years, Stella. 9 years, and he never once mentioned he was on that site the morning everything fell apart. Neither of them slept that night. By morning, Lee had made a decision that surprised even himself, the kind of decision his board would call reckless and his lawyers would call insane. He called every major outlet himself, before anyone could spin it for him, and announced he was stepping down from every board seat connected to the holding company, effective immediately, pending a full independent review. Mina argued against it for 20 minutes before she understood he wasn't asking for her opinion, only telling her what was already decided. "You're going to bleed money doing this," she said. "I've spent a decade protecting my name," Lee said. "I'd rather lose the name than lose the ability to look at her without wondering what I let happen so I could keep it." Stella made her own call that same morning, one that cost her something different but no less real. A lawyer representing the parent company phoned with an offer, generous, discreet, the kind of number designed to make problems disappear, the way the first one had. She listened to the whole pitch without interrupting. "No," she said, "not this time. I'll testify, publicly, on the record." "You understand what that means," the lawyer said, his voice tightening. "Everything comes out. Every detail of the original settlement. Your name in every headline for months." "I understand exactly what it means," Stella said. "I've been running from it for 8 years. I'm tired of running. If you're watching this and you've ever had to choose between protecting yourself and telling the truth, tell me where you're watching from." Because Stella was about to learn that choosing truth doesn't always feel like relief right away. The backlash arrived faster than either of them expected. Within 2 days, a corporate spokesperson was on every business channel questioning Stella's credibility, calling her a woman who had already accepted money once and was now, conveniently, changing her story for attention. Old photos of her surfaced, cropped and captioned, to make her look calculating instead of afraid. Friends who had toasted them at the wedding stopped answering Lee's calls. A golf partner of 15 years sent one text. "Rough time. Let me know if there's anything you need." Then nothing. Neris watched all of it from the sidelines until she couldn't anymore. She had spent years building a business on discretion, on never letting a single detail from a client's wedding leave the room, and she knew that reputation was the only thing keeping her afloat. She called Stella anyway. "I have the full event timeline," she said. "Every vendor, every worker, every badge scan from that day. If it helps reconstruct who came through that hallway and when, it's yours. I don't care what it costs me." It nearly cost her everything. 2 clients canceled within the week, citing concerns about her discretion. Neris signed the documents anyway, because somewhere underneath the perfectly organized seating charts was a woman who had lost her own family to a version of this same silence, years ago, and had promised herself she would never again choose appearances over people. Roscoe published that same week. The story he had sat on for years, the one he had once been too afraid to run, finally went out under his name, with every fact confirmed twice over. He did not soften it. He did not protect anyone, including himself, writing plainly that he had once had enough evidence to expose this same company and had chosen his career instead. The story detonated. For the first 2 days, public opinion ran hard against Lee and Stella both, painting them as a wealthy couple manufacturing a scandal for sympathy. Then, slowly, Something Roscoe hadn't predicted began to happen. Former employees, the ones who had taken quiet settlements just like Stella, started calling him directly. One by one, then in a wave, ordinary people who had spent years believing they were the only ones who had been paid to stay silent. In the middle of it, Mina brought Lee and Stella something that changed the shape of everything they thought they understood. Technicians examining the ring recovered a small embedded chip, the kind used in confidential corporate settlements to authenticate encrypted files. The ring hadn't been swapped to frame Stella at all. "It was never about you," Mina said, turning the small device over in her palm. "Someone used your wedding, a room full of witnesses and cameras nobody thought to search, to smuggle out evidence. They assumed no one would ever think to examine a bride's ring." Lee stood at the window that evening, his company lapel pin still fixed to a jacket he no longer had the right to wear, and unpinned it slowly, the small gesture of a man giving up the last piece of armor he had left. He set it on the table beside Stella's hand without a word, and she understood exactly what it meant. Reporters were already gathering outside by the time Mina's phone rang with the final piece of the recovered data. She read it once, went pale, and looked up at both of them like she wasn't sure how to say it out loud. The chip held one last signature buried in the encrypted files, the authorization that had ordered the original cover-up 8 years ago. The name was not a stranger's. It belonged to someone still alive, still powerful, still very much within reach. And within the hour, that same person had reached out first, requesting a private meeting with Lee alone. Lee stared at the request until the words stopped making sense as words and started feeling like a hand reaching out of the past to grab him one more time. A private meeting, alone, exactly the kind of quiet arrangement that had buried the truth the first time. He showed Stella the message before he answered it. That alone told her how far he had come. "They want to make this go away," he said. "Probably a deal. Step back from testifying, keep it civil, let me keep enough of my name to still be useful to them. And if you go alone," Stella said quietly, "no one will ever know what was actually offered." He didn't go alone. He brought Mina, a recorder, and a copy of every document Roscoe had already published, and he sat across from the man whose signature had ordered the cover-up 8 years earlier, an older man with a calm, practiced voice, who spoke about legacy and reputation like they were the only currency that mattered. "We can make your position very comfortable again," the man said, quietly. "No further exposure. Your wife's testimony becomes unnecessary." Lee thought of the lapel pin he had already set down. He thought of Stella's voice at 3 in the morning, saying she was tired of running. "She's not asking your permission to speak," Lee said, standing, "and neither am I." He walked out without the deal, and for the first time in years, he felt nothing like losing. Stella testified 2 weeks later, in a small hearing room that smelled like old carpet and cheap coffee, with Lee sitting exactly where she could see him. She told the truth in order: the collapse, the settlement, the years of silence, the fear that speaking would somehow prove she had been the problem all along. Her voice shook once. She let it. "I believed if I stayed quiet long enough, none of it would define me," she said. "I understand now that the silence was defining me the whole time, not the accident." Damon testified the following day, and what he offered surprised everyone in the room, including himself. He admitted he had recognized the jacket in the footage within an hour of finding it, and that he had spent 3 days deciding whether loyalty meant protecting Lee from a hard truth or handing him one. "I told myself silence was protection," he said. "It's just fear wearing a nicer word. I should have told you the moment I knew." Lee reached over afterward and gripped his shoulder. No speech, just the weight of a hand that meant the years still counted for something even now. Roscoe's reckoning came quieter, in a conversation with Stella after the hearing, where he finally said the thing his published story had only implied. "I had enough to run this 8 years ago," he said. "I was scared of what it would cost me. People suffered in the years I waited. That's mine to carry, not yours." She didn't tell him it was fine. It wasn't. But she told him the truth mattered more now than it would have then, and that seemed to be enough for both of them to keep breathing. The conspiracy did not survive contact with that many honest voices at once. Regulators moved fast once witnesses stopped disappearing and started talking. The legal outcome, when it finally came, felt almost secondary to what had already happened between the people who lived through it. 6 months later, Lee found Stella standing in a half-finished building on the edge of town, sunlight cutting through exposed beams where a roof would eventually go, dust hanging in the light like something almost alive. The community library. Her design, abandoned the week her old life collapsed, purchased quietly by Lee, the same week he resigned from every board seat that used to define him. "I didn't want you to have to ask," he said. "I wanted you to just find it finished enough to remember it was still yours." Stella walked her hand along a beam she had once drawn on paper and never believed she would touch. "It's not finished," she said. "No," he agreed. "Neither are we. I like that better than pretending we ever could be." They stood together where a chapel might have gone in someone else's story, and they said their vows again, smaller this time. No camera hidden in the ceiling, no audience of 300, just two people who had run out of things to hide from each other. "I promise to tell you when I'm afraid," Stella said, "instead of protecting you from it." "I promise the same," Lee said, "even when it costs me the illusion of having everything under control." He slid a simple ring onto her finger. Nothing hidden inside it this time. Nothing but metal and intention. She did the same for him, and neither of them whispered, "Are we in trouble?" because for the first time since the wedding, neither of them wondered. Months later, the library opened its doors to the public, shelves full, light pouring through the windows Stella had once only imagined. Stella walked through on opening day and found a young woman sitting on the floor near the architecture section. Stella's original blueprints spread across her lap, the ones donated to the historical display by the same city that once buried her name. "You're her," the student said, standing quickly. "The architect. I read about everything. What happened to you, and what you did after." Stella smiled, the old ache still there but smaller now, worn smooth like a stone carried a long time. "I almost stopped designing anything, ever," Stella said. "After the accident." "I know," the student said. "That's why I didn't give up either. When people said I was too young to survive one failure, I thought about you." Stella looked past her, out through the tall windows to where Lee stood waiting, watching her with the same quiet attention he'd had at the altar the day this all began, back when a whispered question hung in the air and neither of them yet understood the answer. They had been in trouble, once. Not because someone tried to destroy them, because they believed, for a while, that loving someone meant protecting them from the truth. They knew better now. And somewhere in a building neither of them had believed could ever be finished, that was the only inheritance that mattered.